Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this chess postmortem. This is a postmortem of an over-the-board game I played yesterday at the club. I thought it was a pretty interesting game, so I thought I would present it to you guys. Let me give you a little background here. In this tournament, it's a 5-round tournament. This is round 4. My rating for this tournament was 1862. My actual current rating is 1826, so I had a bad tournament, but that had not been factored into my rating before the start of this tournament. So my rating for the tournament in terms of the pairings and all that is 1862. My opponent's tournament rating was 1708, and so this is a game I guess you could say I'm expected to win, but it's not an overwhelming edge. It's just an advantage. Of course, if I lose, I'm going to lose a bunch of rating points. But I'm motivated here. First of all, because my previous tournament was a bad one. I would like to do better in this tournament. And facing a lower rated opponent, you definitely don't want to give away those rating points for nothing. So the other thing that well, here let's start making some moves. Another reason why I picked this game was because my opponent played an unusual opening. And so what he's trying to go for here is something called the Dzindzi-Indian. And it's something I had heard of, but it's not anything I was really familiar with. So I'm playing, so far, just the normal moves. And this is, I've got a typical setup for a queen's pawn game with a knight on c3, pawns on c4 and d4. And I'm looking forward to playing the move e4, if he plays knight f6, and I have a sort of classical setup against the king's Indian. He's no longer playing the Nimzo-Indian since he moved the bishop over here to g7, so the pin is out. But he could be playing the Grinfeld with the move d5. It'd be like a Grinfeld. But instead he plays the move c5. And so this is the introduction, the first few moves of the Dzindzi-Indian, where we've just gone down the main line. And here I differ from the main line. So, but as I was facing this over the board, and I'm keeping the screen clear of the distractions here, just so you can have the experience of seeing the positions as I did without the aid of a computer or an opening book. So keep your thinking caps on. I'll give you moments to stop and think about certain critical points in the game. So at this point, it's the first time, I guess, where I'm really stopping to think and wondering what kind of opening am I in here. I was wondering if I play the move d5, for example, could he possibly follow up with b5 and play kind of a gambit similar to a Binko gambit? And it looks like this is playable. There's still an advantage to white, but not an overwhelming advantage, maybe half a pawn, which means that black has some compensation. So I wasn't sure I wanted to go into that, particularly as in a setup I'm not familiar with. It's a little bit dangerous to wander into gambits that you don't know. So I wasn't really tempted to play d5. I was looking for an alternative, and I came up with the move knight f3, and that's what I played. But just to stay within the opening of the territory of the Dzindzi-Indian, the main line goes d5. Let's cancel that. There, d5. Bishop takes c3. Pawn takes. And then f5. And so this is a pretty interesting setup. I guess for one thing, black is clamping down on the e4 square, so he's trying to prevent white from playing that, and he can follow up with let's erase that. He can follow up with knight to f6. Putting more pressure on the e4 square. And he also has ideas, I imagine, of counterattacking the center. So it looks like in the opening book, e4 is a move here. It's some kind of sacrifice trying to open up the position. I would not have played that. Faced with this position in the game, I would probably follow up with knight f3. And that's also in the opening book, so it's probably a playable move. And then d6 is the response that's in the opening book here. So, this looks like a game. Black is probably going to try and undermine the center with a later e6 push, or maybe he even wants to close it up with the move e5. And like I said, the knight can come out to f6. He keeps a clamp on the center. Seems like it's a little bit tricky for him to develop his pieces. The bishop and the knight over here maybe are a bit tangled. So possibly this knight wants to do a maneuver like this. But anyway, if you want to learn more about the Dzindzi-Indian, you're going to have to look up the books and videos by Ron Henley, who seems to be promoting this heavily. So let's go back to the game. I avoided the main line, not knowing it and not even realizing I was in a Dzindzi-Indian, and just played knight f3. And this move, according to the engine, is about equal. So somehow black is equalized here, and the recommended move from the engine is just to take the pawn and knight takes, and then play knight to c6. So just good, solid developing moves, immediately challenging the knight in the center, forcing white to decide whether to defend it or move it away. Probably e3 is the best move here, just trying to hold on to the knight and hold on to the center. Hold on to the knight or hold on to the center. If the knight gets traded, you get another pawn on d4 there. So that would be a way to play. And it's about even according to the engine, so I guess this is okay. But I guess the d5 move is, if you know the opening, is the more challenging way to play, and the way for white to try and play for an edge. But I'm just trying to get to a playable position here, so I would be happy with that outcome. But after knight f3, my opponent did not go for that exchange. He went for the move f5, just following up or continuing along the lines of the Dzindzi-Indian, because that was the opening he was trying to play. And I play the move g3, which is pretty natural here, just stopping the pawn, the f-pawn, from advancing further, and preparing a fianchetto of the bishop. Also, this this pawn doesn't really want to move. It just opens up a hole here if you go all the way to e4. I don't even know if it's safe to play that. Hold on just a second. Let's check that out while I'm here. Is e4 a move here? Yeah, it's playable. You can take it, and then knight takes. This seems kind of like a weakness here, but yeah, and the engine gives c takes d4. So yeah, white's position seems a bit fragile here with these pieces sitting in the center instead of pawns, and this one is loose. The knight on e4 is loose. The knight on d4 is only defended by the queen, and it's already under attack, so it's sort of loose too. So I don't know, bit of a risky position for white, I would say. So e4 could have been played. I was thinking maybe it wasn't the greatest move. If we back up here. And I don't want to play e3 and block in the bishop. So g3 is just a logical way to give the light squared bishop a square to move to and keep the lines open for the dark squared bishop. So you often see this move g3 played against f5, for example, in the Dutch defense. Okay, so right here, I would say so far, up until this point, there's some slight opening advantage to white, but nothing great. Typical kind of small opening advantage. And after this, though, this move queen b6 was a definite mistake. So now, just to mention the time control. The time control was game in 2 hours. So you have 120 moves, 120 minutes to make, say a typical game might be 60 moves. So you have 2 minutes per move. So you have time to think about these. And you have more than 2 minutes when it's an important decision. So you need to recognize that this move comes with some threats. He's threatening just to win the pawn on d4. And so I guess this is your first puzzle. So you're white here. You've got time to think. What is the best move here? Because this move, queen b6, was actually a blunder. That's the hint. And so there is a good move here. And see if you can find it. Okay, pause the video if you want time to think about it. That's I'm going to give away the answer. There's one move that's clearly best, and there are other moves that are playable, but they usually end up, you have to have this same move in reserve. So the move you should really be thinking about here, should have thought of, is knight to d5, just hitting the queen. So when the queen has to move, you don't need to defend the pawn. If the queen has to move, he doesn't have time to take the pawn. And this move knight d5 comes with other threats. For example, knight to c7 forks the king and the rook. So the queen has to move to a square that looks at c7. So that really limits safe moves for the queen. The queen could go to a5, but then I would just chase it away with the bishop, so that would lose the tempo. The queen could go to c6, that's a move. But the engine rates the move my opponent played is actually the best move, queen d8. But now I've gained a tempo, and I've got a nice knight there. And the other thing is, if I had played the move d5 with my pawn, this square would not be available for my knight. So this, in other circumstances, this queen b6 idea might have been good, but you always have to look at the particulars of the position. So it comes out, it makes a threat, but you always have to look at your opponent's counter threats. So knight d5, good move there. And my opponent played queen d8. So now I'm thinking of the square c7, and I just continue developing with the move bishop to f4, trying to put more pressure on that square and threatening knight to c7. And my opponent once again also plays the best move here. He defends that square with the move knight a6. It's both a developing move and a defensive move, so serves two purposes. And then the knight potentially can come into b4 here and make threats against my weaknesses on the light squares here. So good all-purpose move. I play bishop g2, just continuing with development, and my opponent plays e6, kicking my knight away. So that somehow is not the best move. What's the recommended move? The recommended move here is knight f6, yeah, continuing to develop his pieces before making more pawn moves. And that also challenges my knight in the center here. So, but e6 is an understandable move. This knight is kind of annoying here, and you want to get it out of it. And the knight really has nowhere better to go than knight to c3. But that's a fine square for the knight. And then my opponent moved his queen back to b6, renewing this threat of pawn takes on, pawn takes. I guess this is no longer a threat. Pawn takes, knight takes, bishop takes. Oh, no, it's still a threat. Yeah. So I should probably do something about that. But I was thinking, you know what I missed about this position? I missed the fact that his queen was on that. I recognized that the bishop was on that. So I was thinking something like, if he takes, I'll take with the knight, and then he could try this fork with the pawn. Yeah. So I was completely confused at this point of the game, and I ignored the threat to my pawn, and I played the move queen to d2. And what I was thinking was, he takes, I take, he takes, and my queen takes back, hitting the rook. But I can't even play that because his queen would just take my queen. So he grabbed the pawn. And at this point, I realize the errors of my way. And I'm just lucky here that I have a decent move. And really, there's only one move in this position, so you should be able to find it pretty quickly. Okay, if you want some time to think about it, you can. I'm just going to show you the move now. It's knight to b5. And this is good enough to round up the pawn. Now I have three pieces attacking the pawn, and he only has 2 pieces defending it. And he can't really bring another piece to defend. If he tries pushing e4, I can just take that. So, but he has the idea of, if I take that, he can fork the 2 pieces here. The move e5 rather will fork a knight and a bishop if the knight's sitting here and the bishop is sitting here. So there's sort of an indirect defense of that pawn on e4 or d4. So he played the move queen to c5, and I'm not sure what the point of that was. There are other threats here besides taking the pawn. One is the knight coming into d6. I mean, taking the pawn is just getting my material back, so it's not even so much of a threat. Knight coming into d6 is an interesting move there, though. It forces king to move, but it doesn't actually win material. But that might be a very uncomfortable position to have the knight there. So what does the engine say? The engine says, once again, he should just play knight to f6. But it thinks that white has a pretty good position here. So queen to c6, not the best move here. Queen to c5, rather, not the best move. And now I take the pawn. Cancel that. I took this way. So I guess this is the second position you want to think about. I want you to think about is was it really safe for me to take that pawn? Because he does have this threat of pawn to e5 check, which I had to not check. Pawn to e5, forking the two pieces here. So I had to consider this before playing the move knight takes d4 and make sure that it was safe. So that's your quiz. Was this really a safe move, or does e5 win material? Okay, I'm going to give the answer away now. He went ahead and played e5. And what I had planned here, which turned out to be correct, was the move knight to b6. A very typical way to get out of a fork is to move one of the pieces with tempo. And so now this bishop is hanging, but his queen is under attack, so he's got to do something about that. So he went queen to b4, putting the queens in opposition. And this move is a mistake, and now there's one really clear winning move here. So this is your next tactical opportunity. And this is a combination that you have to see maybe 2 moves deep, 2 or 3 moves deep. So I want you to think of both this move and the next move. See if you can find both of those. Okay, you're going to need more time, hopefully, than that. I mean, once again, keep in mind that it's a slow game. I have, maybe 5 or 10 minutes to consider an important position like this and come up with the right move. Even 15 and 20 minutes is not unheard of, but 5 or 10 minutes is an appropriate budget for a position like this. It's very tactical, and the right move can win the game for you. But you also have to keep enough time on your clock that you can finish the game. You don't want to burn up all your time thinking about the killer move and then be without enough time to finish it off correctly, get into time trouble later. Okay, so enough of that. I'm going to give the answer away. Pause the video and think about it till you get it. But the answer is knight c7. Knight c7 check. So the point about this, and why it's not just about the one move, is that it attacks the king rather. It attacks the rook. But the key point is that it also attacks the knight on a6. And the knight on a6 is the sole defender of the queen. So if this knight goes with tempo, the queen's in big trouble. And if queen takes queen is played, bishop takes queen gets my bishop out of hock. So if we look at the material here, the material is still even at this point. Same number of pawns, same number of pieces. And I have a piece hanging. Very important not to forget that. But he's in check. So if he takes the knight, then I take the queen. So that part is easy. So he's not going to take the knight, which means he has to move the king. And he plays the best move here, king d8, attacking my knight. So now, like I said, the material is even, and I have 2 pieces hanging. So what was my plan for getting out of this position? My plan was to take the knight, undermining his queen. So removing the defender of the queen. And now he really has to do something here. So the first point is, if he takes my queen, he didn't play that, I take back with my bishop, and so my bishop is no longer hanging, and my knight is not really hanging. Maybe it looks like it's hanging, but because of the bishop on g2, he can't take my knight. This pawn is pinned. So I'm just a piece up. So this sequence wins a whole piece. So let's back up to this critical position. You have to see ahead this far, but in this position, you can see ahead that after knight to c7 check, he has no choice but to move his king, because moving the knight, taking with the knight, loses the queen. After that, you can take the knight, which removes the defense from his queen. If he exchanges queens, you're going to be a piece up, because you've won a knight over here. He can't take back because of the bishop, and you can take back with your bishop, getting your bishop out of hock. So he didn't take the queen, though. What he tried in this position was, okay, knight takes c7 was played, king d8, knight takes a6. What he played in this position was queen takes c4, just picking up a pawn. And now it looks like I have two pieces hanging. But as I said before, the knight's not really hanging because that pawn is pinned. So all I have to do is get the bishop out of hock, which I can do with the move bishop to g5 check. So anyway, that's I think this was the main attraction of the game, was this tactical sequence. I think it's pretty typical, the kind of tactics you can find during a slow game. You know, stronger players maybe can find this in blitz, you know, but not me. But it's kind of interesting stuff you get into in the slow games, and why I like them. Okay, and so now I am going to be just a piece up. He needs to defend against this check. He played bishop to f6, and then I retreated my knight. I don't even have to retreat my knight. In fact, the chess engine is recommending the move queen to d6, which I thought about during the game. I mean, look at his bishop. His bishop can't move. The queen to d6 prevents this pawn from moving, and this pawn is pinned. So his bishop is just stuck there, and I'm placing a threat against his bishop here, and also queen. Well, here, let's take a look at this, though. This hangs the bishop, right? I think that's why I didn't play it. I mean, this is just losing the bishop, but there's probably... Oh, yeah, there's a mate. That's a very nice point. I missed that. So, yes, if bishop takes here, queen here is checkmate. Very nice. And the knight is still guarding that square. Oops, this diagonal was drawn correctly. I mean, the queen is covering all of these escape squares of the king, and the knight is covering this escape square. So pretty cool. So queen d6 would have been the killer move there. I'm happy to just get my knight out of hock and put some pressure on the e-pawn, but that was not the best way. But it's still, I mean, I have an advantage of +6 according to the engine, so it's still just completely winning. He played e4 here. Yeah, this is the idea. Just shut down the bishop on this diagonal so the knight would be hanging. Now I don't have to worry about it. I just develop, bring a rook out with a threat on the queen. Queen ran off to f7. At this point I decided to take off the bishop. I was waiting to take that off because I was hoping maybe I could get some tactic against e7 here. And when I take the bishop, he takes back with the knight, which defends d7 rather, defends d7. So I was sort of avoiding that, looking for other moves that I could play, but I ran out of other moves and finally exchanged. And so he takes back. I just castle. He plays b6, kicking my knight, and yeah, that was the other thing I was a little bit worried about right here. Just wanted to bring this up. After knight to a5, knight to c5, knight a to c5, he played e4. I was a little bit worried that this knight was trappable here. He can't play the move e6, however, because I just take it with the queen. And he can't play the move b6 because of the bishop taking the rook. So he can't chase the knight away. But if he could, the knight has no squares. The queen's guarding this square. And if you look at all the other squares... no, this is a square. So it's after the move e4. Right now, the bishop is no longer on this diagonal. It's shut down. So now the move b6 is a threat. And the knight has no moves at this point, right? These squares are all taken. The queen's covering those, and these are all taken. So the knight has nowhere to escape to. It's effectively trapped. So I do have to be careful. I played this move rook c1 just to see where his queen would go. I guess if it stays, according to the engine, queen f7 is the best move. So I guess there's other problems that show up if the queen tries to stay over here in touch with this square. So now I'm not so worried about the knight being kicked because it has the square a4 to come back to. Okay, so the game continues with the exchange. I castle, and he does play the move b6, kicking my knight, and I get to the square a4. That's what reminded me. He played bishop b7, and I just bring my knight back into the game. I want to undermine the center. He plays d5, supporting it, and I play the move f3. And now, this pawn is pinned. There's, an effective pin along this line, so I can just take the pawn on e4 here if he does nothing. And he actually resigned at this point. I think he was getting kind of discouraged, and it looks like his center is going to fall apart. So if he I thought he would just unpin, maybe start moving his king to safety. I can take on e4, and he can take back. I mean, it keeps my bishop locked out of the game. I thought he might have some play here. But it says, the engine says knight b5 is a good move. The problem is, yeah, he's just opened himself up. Probably rook to d8. d1 is a good move too. Let's back up. Can rook d1 be played here? Yeah, that's a playable move as well. So, this position is certainly winning for white, but there's more to be played here. The game is not over. So I think he was more just discouraged at the course of the game. The other thing, after f3, let's go ahead and show the recommended sequence from the chess engine. The chess engine recommends e3, queen takes. Yeah, it's hard to see why that's a good move. And queen e7. So this is, funny kind of stuff chess engines do sometimes. I mean, I would just take the queens off here, and I've got an extra piece. Eventually, this bishop is going to break free. So it's hard to believe that's really the best play. Are there other ideas from the chess engine? E takes f3 seems also like capitulation. Just e takes. And now, once again, I'm going to be able to liberate my bishop, and the extra piece will come into play. So I think actually, having looked at those lines, I think my idea of just king e8 is a reasonable way to play. The engine says, well, you just leave these pawns here and play knight to b5. So yeah, maybe that's a problem. Maybe there's no way to prevent me from invading on the 7th rank here. So let's continue the line. Queen d7, queen d4, hitting the knight. Queen to d8, defending the knight. Rook to c7. Yeah, so I invade on the 7th rank with my pieces, and it's just a matter of time before I start mopping up here. So anyway, he resigned before any of this happened. Maybe a little bit prematurely. I would have played until until my position was definitely lost. But I guess he was feeling kind of discouraged at this point. But I thought there were some interesting points in that game, particularly the tactical sequence there in the middle. Hope you guys enjoyed that. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.